today's question. I gotta ask you about Pinkerton. Everybody always wants to know about Pinkerton. It's the legendary Weezer album. And I don't know if you know my history with Weezer. I got a demo tape. I'll give you the long story because you probably don't know it.
I don't.
And it'll be fun. Somewhere 92, 93, I was working on a project over at Master Control. You remember Master Control in Burbank?
Yeah, Aisley.
You remember the Recycler, which was a free ad newspaper.
It was Craigslist on
I
paper.
was selling some Anvil cases through the Recycler, and this guy calls me and says, I want to buy some of these cases. Comes down to the studio and says, I'll buy these 2 from you. And he said, oh, you're a producer? I have a cassette here of my band's demos. Would you listen to them? And I was like, sure, of course. So take the cassette from him. And it's Matt Sharp, okay?
Oh, shit, that's
the bass
funny.
player.
Yeah.
So I take the cassette, and for some reason, I don't listen to it right away. I put it in my car in the side compartment, and about 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm Saturday morning, going to the car wash and cleaning out stuff, and I find a cassette, and I'm like, oh, I should listen to this. He was a nice guy,
right.
you know? I put the cassette in. First song is Jonas.
Oh, shit.
Then Say It Ain't So, Sweater Song. And I instantly get the phone, and because it was the days of car phones, and I call Matt, and I'm like, hey, your band is great. I love these songs. You know, what are you guys all about? What are you doing? And he said, well, we have a rehearsal house that we all live at in West LA. You know, why don't you come over to the house? So I go to their place. They're all living in this house together in West LA. They were playing around town. I helped them get to record companies. I got them to Elektra, to Interscope, to Capitol, to a bunch of labels. Everybody passed on them. Everybody said, I don't know about the songs. I don't know. You know, the vocals aren't that great. You know, the harmonies are really out of tune. So for about 6 months or so, I tried to shop the band. Maybe it was longer than that. Restless Records, which was Enigma Records, was Bill Hine was one of the first people that was into the band, but they were a small label.
Right, so it's the indie that has the taste and the foresight to go, this is great.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden the major label sniffs it and says, oh.
And the minute Todd Sullivan was the first real record label that came and saw him and got it. And then, as you know, eventually they signed to Todd at Geffen. But the guys were great in that they took care of me. They gave me a finder's fee and everything.
That's
and
awesome.
Todd got involved, and then he got Rick Ocasek involved, and the rest is history, you know. But segue to second album, Pinkerton, which is one of the ones that really stands the test of time. And you were a major part of that. And I still hear El Scorcho all the time on the radio.
Oh, yeah.
And from that opening guitar tone, whatever that is, like clean guitars, double tracked or whatever, it just like, you instantly are like, I'll listen to this. This has got a character. This has got a sound. This has got a personality. Like, what did you do? How did you get that guitar sound? What is that album all about? Tell us about it.
All right, well, Todd Sullivan actually called me and said, we're going to make another record. And this is after the Blue album, which is monumental. And he said, we want you to remix Say It Ain't So, because they had taken all the feedback out of it. It muted all the feedback. So you'll hear it on the radio sometimes. There's no feedback in the down, in the chorus part. So I was going to Electric Lady to remix that, and the whole time thinking, why don't they just get Chris Shaw to do it, because he mixed the album and it sounds incredible. So they did get Chris Shaw to do it, and so I started Pinkerton next door while Chris was remixing Say It Ain't So. The one thing they said was the band hated to use headphones, so we're at Electric Lady and I set it up so that they played live. Was they're a great band, they could totally play live.
Yep. And
we used wedges. And they had the self cues, but the self cues powered wedges, so the whole room was basically on, blowing up. at the time. It was four guys, and Matt Sharp, as you know, has an insane bass sound. He's using orange heads and cabinets that were so loud, and Brian was playing a Travis Bean, and Rivers, I don't remember honestly what guitar Rivers had at the time. It was some sort of Stratty with a humbucker.
Right.
But we had a 30th anniversary Marshall in there and a Plexi 50 watt, and it was basically live. Everything about it was live. And the thing that I couldn't get past was trying to tie it all together in the room because it was so blown out, and the Blue record was not really blown out. And so I, knowing Jason Casaro and him being a mentor and him working with Eddie Martinez, a great guitar player, I always loved Eddie's sounds and Robert Palmer and the stuff he did there. So we went to visit Eddie one day, and I asked Eddie about his guitar sound, and he said, I used to use these Electro-Harmonix linear power boosters.
Oh, yeah.
The little ones you
LPB,
plug into your LPB ones. You plug them into your guitar. And
Yeah.
He rack mounted them because they were so bad, running around on stage, that he puts them in the rack. And he goes, I got a bunch of them here. Do you want to take a few and try them out? So he gave me a shoebox full of old LPB ones that were half broken, and I cobbled a couple together. And when I got there, I actually I had a pair of M49s on the room of the band live, and I put the LPB ones on the room sound.
What?
I blew up the $20,000 tube mics with a $20 LPB one, and that was the room sound that created the bombasticness of that band playing live.
It does have such a dark, dirty tone compared to the first record. And I remember talking to Rivers about it after, and Chris Shaw as well, and they told me that Rick's whole thing was, I want to say it was a Mesa Boogie amp, but I might be wrong about that. But basically small amps turned down really low, really very little SPL, crank the preamp, get the distortion there, and very little SPL, so the speaker isn't really pushing a lot of air, which means you turn the mic preamp up, and of course everything comes up to your face and feels like a really huge guitar sound. So they really went from
I went the other way.
A whole other way.
Yeah, I was like, how do you make this? There were other things happening at the time within the band, and Matt had the rentals as well, and he was just got a deal on Maverick, so he was in that area, and Brian had just come into the band. So together as a team, to make it cohesive, and Electric Lady, which kind of, when people tell me that the sound of the room changed every day because there was water going underneath there. Yeah,
yes, river. There's a river that runs underneath. Back in the bass amp closet there, where you used to always put the B15 or whatever you put the bass, whatever kind of bass amp it was, you put it in this closet in the back of the room. And the New York City River ran under that and would flood sometimes. And I remember working in there where you would come in the morning and the bass amp would be soaking wet.
I just put them all in the same room. They just wanted to hear each other, and to get that cohesiveness to gel, the only way I could do it was to blow up the room a little bit, and it came down to Eddie Martinez's LPB ones, and there's so much live on that record, and at some point, I mean, he's going past the guitar sound at this point, but it was two Marshalls, a 30th anniversary for Rivers and a 50 watt Plexi reissue JMP for Brian. And Matt's Orange, which I still try to buy to this day because it sounded so good.
Really?
And they were just on power amp distortions blowing up in that room with the M49s on stun and cut live to tape, and then some tape editing going on between takes. And there was actually so many songs. It was insane. And Rivers is a great soloist, and Brian's a great guitar player, some very unique styles together, so that worked. And Matt just hunkering it all down, and Pat's it.
Do you remember anything specifically about El Scorcho or Tired of Sex or any of the specific songs?
I remember just asking, like, a lot of times your engineer mind goes, that drum kit is not tuned as well as it can be, like you're hitting that floor tom and it's howling. And I'm like, it's just obvious when you're tight mic'd. So you push the mics away, and that's where you go. That's where the mentality for me came about, just trying to capture the big picture room. Because when you hit that floor tom now, it doesn't quite howl as much and sound like it's pitching down.
Yes.
But when you do hear that first drum fill, you go, this is a unique drum sound, which, you can't beat them, you join them. And they loved at the time they were bringing up some references like this is where Dave Fridman ended up coming back into the picture. They love Flaming Lips, and they loved the band Hum. Keith Cleversley, I think, is the guy. And they would bring me stuff like that, which was Vaseline from STP a little bit later on. You're just like, okay, this is not your normal blue record hi-fi rock sound.
The drums are all taped up and dead and point sources. The snare really, it sounds pretty natural to me, but it's definitely brighter and ringier, crisper overall than the previous record, and actually from what they would do after that. I mean, that record really stands alone in the catalog.
It kind of went back to Rick on the Green album. And I think Tom O'Dalgy mixed it, and we added some keyboard stuff. I mean, the tapes came in, but we ended up doing keyboard overdubs after he mixed it. I think it was crazy. But I think no one knew at the time that it might be the predecessor to what would be called emo, you know, which people tell me that that's their reference. I mean, I listened to the Blue record and go, this sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I like Pinkerton as well because of the involvement, but it was really like a very unorthodox method of everything to the...
You probably haven't done a record like that since then, have you?
No, not like that. And there was points...
When you do Bad Religion, do you do that stuff live?
Some of it was cut live. Yeah. I mean, the one thing about working today is everything's kind of pieced together, and you never really know what things are going to sound like until you get to the mix stage, you know. But back then...
Not me.
Oh, yeah, you knew the... Well, I'll tell you one interesting story about that record was at one point we were working at Fort Apache, and because it was live, you know, then they wanted to change a note on the guitar, but the bass was already done and Matt wasn't around. So that we could easily change the note on the bass, but the note on the bass is in the room. So I literally was using an H3000. I was calling it Joe Tools, and I was sampling the room and pitching it to the correct note and flying it in, punching it in like two-handed.
And this is analog tape.
Analog tape. So as the tape went by, I could pitch Matt's bass to like an A to an A sharp or whatever. But I'd also have to pitch the room because it would still sound out of tune until I pitched anything that the bass was bleeding through, which was pretty much everything at that point.
It is pretty amazing when you think of, you know, sort of how crude our tools were then, and you know, it was the harmonizer that you tuned a voice.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, somebody went a little bit sharp, you patched it in the harmonizer, and when the note came along, you just went.
And no one really cared. You know, I mean, a little bit out of tune here and there was actually good.
Yeah, it was exciting.
It was real.
Yeah,
you know, I love '70s records that are. To me, they're maybe a little bit sharp because they speed them up to get through the radios and get that commercial in there and that excitement of being slightly sharp. Why not? As long as everybody tunes at the same note, who cares?
Oh, you're right. It gives things an edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.